thanks to an assault by the progressive left on the Star Spangled Banner and its composer, Francis Scott Key.
So have you ever seen an ad like that? You know, the blue background generally just saying the left is bad. More than likely, that's PragerU. And maybe wondering who that is, I'm here to explain it to you.
I'm gonna fight them all. A seven-nation army couldn't hold me back. They're gonna rip it off.
Well, have you ever thought, college is just too liberal for me? Instead, I want an old guy to lie to me for about 5 minutes or so. Dennis Prager has you covered for that. PragerU is an organization created by conservative talk show host Dennis Prager, and no one really cares about him. The goal is, as they say, to promote what is true, what is excellent, and what is noble through digital media. Unfortunately, they don't do that, not even remotely. And you may be thinking, well, I've never seen anything from PragerU. What's the big problem? Sure, they may have some ads here and there, but I don't really care. Why should it matter to me? And oh my god, there's so much not even morally, but factually wrong here. So I want to walk you through some of their worst things that they've done. So that's what I'm gonna do. Welcome to a walkthrough of Prager University.
Taking the time right behind my back.
Prager University couldn't even get the name right, but in order to be fair, we should probably look at why he named it that way.
Why aren't we a university? Now, if university means, by definition, you grant degrees and you are accredited by whoever accredits universities to be a degree granting place, then we're not a university. But is that the only definition? My contention is that it is a university, but it doesn't grant degrees and it's not accredited, and that's absolutely accurate.
So do you need to be accredited? And do you need to give out diplomas in order to be a university? Yes. Yes, you do. There's no arguing. University, institution of higher learning, providing faculties for teaching and research. University, and authorized to institution of higher education, usually comprising a college of liberal arts and sciences and graduate and professional schools, and having the authority to confer degrees in various fields of study. Having a college of liberal arts and a program of graduate studies together with several professional schools. Degrees. Dennis, your organization is not a university. And you know that because it says so in the FAQ. Not only does your argument fall completely flat, but your argument is an argument that you said you never made against something that you apparently don't believe. So, which is it? If you think it's a university, then you're just wrong. Me? Why? Because if you think you're a university, you are just wrong. That's incorrect. And if not, then why did you name your organization Prager University? If you put it in the name, we're gonna think that that's what you think you are. There's a reason that the series you're watching right now isn't called Bunkuio's Cooking Classes, because I'm not doing cooking right now. That's not what I do.
I'm talking to myself at night because I can't forget.
We seek out the most qualified, credentialed and accomplished experts in the field appropriate to the subject of each video. Our presenters include highly respected college professors, award-winning journalists, successful entrepreneurs, and more.
Yeah, you already know that's not right. Holy shit, do these guys suck. Let's take a look at some of these qualified, high-minded thinkers PragerU offers up.
Transgendered bathrooms have come out of nowhere and are being jammed down our throat. I guarantee you, the next stop on this train is pedophilia.
That glyphosate in Argentina is causing increases in cancer. You can drink a whole quart of it and it won't hurt you.
You want to drink some? We have some here.
I'd be happy to, actually. Yeah. Not really, but
not really?
I know it wouldn't hurt me.
If you say so, I have some glyphosate.
No, I'm not stupid.
Iraq is a crappy place filled with a bunch of, semi-literate primitive monkeys.
Do I believe in climate change? No.
You don't believe in climate change?
Well, I think the climate always changes, I guess is what I say. Do I believe that this is like, an issue that is global warming, which they've changed conveniently? They got rid of the word once scientists started disproving it. Now they only say climate change. No, I think that was just a way to extract dollars from Americans. I don't at all.
Yeah, some great minds you got there, Dennis. And great mind you have there, Dennis. You and your kind of rapey opinions. Here's a conversation he actually had with a caller who was complaining that her husband was cheating on her with a bunch of prostitutes. Dennis says, if he was sleeping with prostitutes, he obviously wasn't getting enough sex at home. She replies, well, he would come home from work late, reeking of alcohol, lipstick on his collar. It was a real turnoff. Not to mention, I was concerned about sexually transmitted disease. And his reply was, he went to work and you still didn't reward him with sex on demand? I can't believe I went to work and you're still not my sex slave. Fuck Dennis Prager.
'Cause I can't forget.
Alright, so what? It's not a real university. If the information's good, then the organization could be good. If they're teaching good things, oh well, so what if they're not technically an accredited university? They could still be helpful. But they aren't, and they don't teach good. The following are actual arguments that they made in the video, The Truth About CO2. I'm gonna play the main arguments made and then go through them afterwards.
CO2, 1 atom of carbon and 2 atoms of oxygen. If we pump much more of it into the atmosphere, the argument goes, we're going to alter the climate, catastrophically. If we don't save ourselves from ourselves, we're toast. That's the claim. Here's what's strange, though. All life is carbon-based, and the carbon for all that life originates from carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. All of the carbon in the fossil fuels we are burning for energy today was once in the atmosphere as carbon dioxide before it was consumed by plankton in the sea and plants on the land. Coal, oil, and natural gas are the remains of those plankton and plants that have been transformed by heat and pressure deep in the Earth's crust. If there were no carbon dioxide in the Earth's atmosphere, the Earth would be a dead planet, period. Talk about catastrophic climate change. Take away CO2 and you'd have it. But how can something that makes life possible be bad? Can you have too much of it? In theory, yes. That's what climate alarmists say is happening now. CO2 levels are getting too high. Are they right? Well, if we look at the big picture, we find something surprising. For most of the history of life on Earth, carbon dioxide has been present in the atmosphere at much higher levels than it is today. The optimum level of CO2 for plant growth, for example, is 4 to 5 times what is currently found in our atmosphere. That's why greenhouse growers worldwide actually inject additional CO2 into their greenhouses. They want to promote plant growth. Likewise, higher CO2 levels in the global atmosphere will boost food and forest productivity. That will come in handy.
Carbon is necessary for life. That doesn't mean that it can't be bad. Normally, the sun heats up the earth, and then that heat going onto the earth, heating it up, goes back up into space. So the heat doesn't get retained in the earth. It's all good. But the extra carbon that we're pumping out isn't being consumed by the plants or algae or anything like that. So it's staying in the atmosphere. And since carbon traps heat, and it's in the atmosphere, it's trapping heat in the atmosphere. All of the heat coming from the sun doesn't have a good way to exit. So all of the heated carbon stays in the atmosphere and continues to heat the globe. And that heating is affecting the water too, which makes water vapor, which also causes climate change as well. If you want to look into that, there's sources in the description. And the climate change means more than just being warm. It also means more extreme weather and sea levels rising. So yeah, carbon would probably help plants grow. But if sea levels are rising and there's more extreme weather, and the plant is underwater, doesn't matter how much carbon you got, that plant's not gonna fucking grow. Again, if you need more resources for that, there's some in the description. It doesn't matter if carbon helps plants grow. Sometimes, if there's extra carbon, which we are producing, even if it helps some plants grow, it's still rising sea levels, causing the globe to warm, and causing more extreme weather. Which is bad. Also, I forgot to mention this. Here's a graph from NASA saying that carbon levels are higher than they have been, so you know. I'm not just gonna take your word on that, Patrick. Put very simply, the carbon that was in the ground we are taking out and pumping into the atmosphere, and it's getting trapped there and trapping more heat there, which is causing climate change. And you know, they cut out so much context, they should have just lied. At least that would have made my job easier. I guess promoting only some of what is technically true doesn't roll off the tongue as well.
Back and forth and through my mind, behind a cigarette.
All right, maybe the whole science thing isn't their strong suit. Maybe an educational organization, that's not their whole thing. Maybe science just isn't their thing. So let's look at a video talking about artistic stuff called "Why is Modern Art So Bad?" Hearing that title, where you already know where this is going.
Master after master, from Leonardo to Rembrandt to Bierstadt, produced works that inspired, uplifted, and deepened us. And they did this by demanding of themselves the highest standards of excellence, improving upon the work of each previous generation of masters, and continuing to aspire to the highest quality attainable. But something happened on the way to the 20th century. The profound, the inspiring, and the beautiful were replaced by the new, the different, and the ugly. Today, the silly, the pointless, and the purely offensive are held up as the best of modern art. And as with most revolutions, the first generation or so produced work of genuine merit. Monet, Renoir, and Degas still maintained elements of disciplined design and execution. But with each new generation, standards declined until there were no standards. All that was left was personal expression. The great art historian Jacob Rosenberg wrote that quality in art is not merely a matter of personal opinion, but to a high degree objectively traceable. How can art be objectively measured? I'm challenged. In responding, I simply point to the artistic results produced by universal standards compared to what is produced by relativism. The former gave the world the birth of Venus and the dying Gaul, while the latter has given us the Holy Virgin Mary, fashioned with cow dung and pornographic images, and Petra, the prize-winning sculpture of a policewoman squatting and urinating, complete with a puddle of synthetic urine. Without aesthetic standards, we have no way to determine quality or inferiority, but also the subject matter has gone from the transcendent to the trashy. Where once artists applied their talents to scenes of substance and integrity from history, literature, religion, mythology, etc., many of today's artists merely use their art to make statements, often for nothing more than shock value. It is equally the fault of the so-called art community, the museum heads, gallery owners, and the critics who encourage and financially enable the production of this rubbish. It is they who champion graffiti and call it genius, promote the scatological and call it meaningful. It is they who, in reality, are the naked emperors of art. For who else would spend $10 million on a rock and think it is art, is art, is art?
The main flaw with this one is that they mix objective and subjective. Like a third grader. Basically, the whole argument is, yeah, modern art is like objectively bad. Oh, well, how do you know that? Well, modern art is objective. In his defense, other than the circular reasoning, he did provide one piece of evidence. That evidence being a quote from art historian Jacob Rosenberg. Specifically a quote with half of it fucking missing.
Artistic value or quality in a work of art is not merely a matter of personal opinion but to a high degree a matter of common agreement among artistically sensitive and trained observers and to a high degree objectively traceable. Our value judgment is a composite of subjective and objective elements. Subjective I call those which are the purely personal response of an individual, objective, those which are agreed upon by trained observers and therefore meet with general acceptance.
So what Jacob just said there is, if a group of trained professionals view a piece as good or bad, that will mean it is objectively good or bad, at least how he defines objectively. So he's not just saying, oh, well, modern art is bad if you say so. Like, that's not what he's saying. He's saying if a group of art professionals, whether that be artists or critics or whatever, generally agree that a piece of art is bad, and the public agrees as well, then you can reasonably call it objectively bad. But the bad thing for you was a lot of critics enjoy modern art. But you couldn't include the full quote because if you did, then the art system has been infiltrated by people who are trained to like modern art thing wouldn't fucking make sense. Because it doesn't make sense. And if you're not super into art, then let me give you another example. You know Anthony Fantano? Let's say that he said his opinions were objective and that this album is better than this album objectively. Are you just gonna take it because he knows music theory? No. If 5 guys who knew music theory said the same thing, would you just take it? No, because there's no point in rating art in an objective way. If you say that this thing is objectively better than that thing, it's kind of pointless because regardless, some people are going to like the first one, but some people are also going to like the second one. And to invalidate the second one is dumb. And that's why Anthony Fantano doesn't say this is objectively better than this, because he understands that art should be rated on an opinion level and not trying to force objective things in there. And especially not trying to justify it with circular reasoning and half a quote from Jacob Rosenberg. Trying to measure art objectively will always be controversial and always like pointlessly isolating. So just don't. If people want to enjoy modern art, you can view it as gross. You can view it as not good. Except that that's an opinion, though.
And the message coming from my eyes says leave it alone.
Okay, well maybe science and art isn't their thing. Do you ever think about that? Maybe they're a history channel. Maybe they didn't note it, but they're big on history. Like that's what they're known for. Maybe they just spend so much of their time on history that they don't care about the other stuff, and they're just putting it out as filler. I'm cutting out again. No.
Columbus Day. The day where progressives indoctrinate your children into believing Columbus to be Satan incarnate, the USA to be his evil spawn, and the Native Americans to be pacifists. And so now we have Indigenous Peoples Day. That's only natural because the whole charade has become an exercise in hating Western civilization, which is really just an exercise in hating yourself. First, as far as Columbus goes, the guy deserves some credit, right? Flawed, to be sure, but he was the greatest navigator of his age, the first person to cross the Atlantic from the continent of Europe, and he did so without any maps and only 3 small ships. I'll bet that you probably believe Columbus and other European settlers to simply have committed mass genocide against Native Americans, sorry, indigenous. But here's the truth. While there were many examples of brutal warfare between Europeans and Native Americans, neither side actually committed genocide. In fact, there was never an outright policy of Indian extermination. The Native Americans were mostly wiped out through infectious diseases that the settlers had inadvertently brought with them. As far as genocide by violence, you can look at any historical account of even the most one-sided battles and find that they were still just that, battles. Take Wounded Knee, although hundreds of years later I only bring it up because I know that if I don't, you will. It's become ubiquitous with the idea of Native American genocide. After all, there were 150 to 350 Aboriginals killed or wounded. That's terrible. But there were also 25 American soldiers killed and 39 wounded. That's not genocide. That's a one-sided beatdown with Old Glory wielding the hammer. And sometimes the massacres went the other direction. See the Apaches for reference, or the Comanches, or a dozen or so other tribes. So the natives often gave as good as they got. Not exactly the way genocide usually tends to work. Truth, not only did the natives brutally take out people, but they took out entire forests and hunted species to extinction. You also probably believe that the Native American, two-spirited First Nation something or other culture was a beautiful, pantheistic one of peace. The truth is, not so much. When Columbus arrived, the islands were inhabited by 2 main tribes, The Arawaks, who were passive and friendly, and the Caribs, who were vicious cannibals. The Arawaks actually lived in fear of the Caribs for, you guessed it, the reasons being that they hunted them down to enslave them and eat them. Yes, eat them. Ironically, we get the name Caribbean Islands from those famous people eaters. The only way settlers were able to conquer this land was through the help of Native Americans who teamed up with them to settle the score with other tribes who were even bigger jerks than they were. That's not even to mention the populations in Central and South America famous for ritual human sacrifice. You think Cortez was able to command and conquer with only 500 or so conquistadors? Of course not. It took 50,000 screaming, angry allied natives who'd had it up to here with being tortured, enslaved, and forced to carry gold for the other native Aztecs.
I wonder why people blame the sickness on Columbus and his crew. Maybe it's because they fucking bought it! Oh, it wasn't genocide because a couple of Europeans died? That doesn't make it okay. We invaded their land, brought them sickness, brutally enslaved them, like a lot, and did a crippling war. But you're right. They killed a couple of Europeans, so, you know, it's fine. Good job at the massacre, Chris. They all had it coming. And guess what? We all know they weren't peaceful. No one is. It's a primitive civilization. Of course they're not peaceful. Of course they're not as civilized as the Europeans. Does that mean that they were, oh, so moral? No. But does that mean that they should be brutally enslaved? Like, a lot? And abused? And basically wiped out in a super one-sided war? No. You don't need to defend Christopher Columbus. The whole argument is just like, okay, but what if we didn't give this rapist, slave owner, his own day? It's not putting any blame on you for living in the place that he discovered, which he didn't even really discover. There were already people there. Saying that maybe this guy shouldn't have his name attached to a holiday because he was shitty. Okay, I'm done with the shtick, expecting them to be good. We already know they're bad just from those videos, but let's keep going. Let's look at a couple of clips from the videos. There is no gender wage gap and the war on boys.
The 77 cents on the dollar statistic is calculated by dividing the median earnings of all women working full-time by the median earnings of all men working full-time. In other words, if the average income of all men is, say, $40,000 a year, and the average annual income of all women is, say, $30,800, that would mean that women earn 77 cents for every dollar a man earns. 30,800 divided by 40,000 equals 0.77. But these calculations don't reveal a gender wage injustice because they don't take into account occupation, position, education, or hours worked per week. Even a study by the American Association of University Women, a feminist organization, shows that the actual wage gap shrinks to only 6.6 cents when you factor in different choices men and women make. And the key word here is choice. The small wage gap that does exist has nothing to do with paying women less, let alone with sexism. It has to do with differences in individual career choices that men and women make.
Okay, not even going to touch that argument. What I'm going to do is play you a clip from the War on Boys.
Boys tend to be disorganized and restless. Some have even been known to be noisy and hard to manage. Sound like any boy you know? But increasingly, our schools have little patience for what only a couple of decades ago would have been described as boyishness. As psychologist Michael Thompson has aptly observed, girls' behavior is the gold standard in schools. Boys are treated like defective girls. Now, as a result, these defective girls are not faring well academically. Compared with girls, boys earn lower grades, they win fewer honors, they're far less likely to go to college. Boys are languishing academically while girls are prospering. In an ever more knowledge-based economy, this is not a recipe for a successful society.
When women don't generally do as well as men, oh well, it's just because of their personal choices. That's how it is, and that's okay. But when boys aren't doing as well as girls, oh my god, change the system. These boys aren't behaving as well as girls and they're not being praised for it. Boys will be boys. This is blatant sexist special treatment. And in most cases, you could argue that, like, okay, well, this guy isn't this guy. So even though it's under the same organization, like, not all of the people are necessarily going to believe the same thing, but this is literally the same person doing both of these videos. As a little bonus round, here's Candace Owens contradicting herself in the video about not caring what celebrities think.
Dear celebrities, I'm sorry to be the one to have to break this to you, but we do not care, not in the slightest particle of an imaginary thing, what you think. If this surprises you, I understand, because, let's be fair, we have played an important role in your delusion. You may have actually come to believe that we care what you think. But you're wrong. Nobody cares what you think. Nobody. Well, maybe your mother and your therapist do, but we don't. Not even a little.
Listen, I think differently. Kanye West thinks differently. I can guarantee you if he and I get in the same room, we will have a lot of disagreements. The one thing that we will celebrate is our right to think differently. I don't understand what's so controversial for the left to understand this. The way that they have demonized him in the last 72 hours is almost sickening, but at the end of the day, it's going to have adverse effects. I can guarantee you that.
I'm Ben Shapiro, editor of the Daily Wire.
Ben Shapiro, it's you. Okay, so as you being such an objective person, I have an organization I want to tell you about. It's called Prageru, and they lie all the time, and they cut contests so much, and you caring so much about objective and fact-based stuff, like you would think that you would see a problem with that. Please just tell me you see a problem with it, and you did a video for them.
Vanderbilt University, November 2015. 200 students rise up to protest the white privilege and microaggressions of the racist, bigoted Vanderbilt administration. The protesters don't offer any specific examples of discrimination, but that doesn't matter. What matters is that they feel victimized.
Ben, the first few sentences that came out of your smug little mouth in your video about facts was wrong. It was a lie, which, if you don't know, Ben, is the opposite of a fact.
Students, faculty and community members marched on Vanderbilt University's campus Saturday afternoon to protest hate speech and bigotry, following the publication of Professor Carol Swain's op-ed in the Tennessean.
And do you know what labor-intensive research that took? I copy-pasted the 4 first words that you said into Google and clicked on the second result. They were protesting hate speech after Professor Carol Swain, I don't know, her, wrote an op-ed that some students found offensive about Islam. That's what they were protesting. If you agree with that or if you disagree with that, that's a reason. You can't just say that they protested for no reason. That's what they protested for. This whole video is about facts. It's about your literal catchphrase. It took 1 minute for you to lie, Ben. I need a break. If you're just saying, yeah, and people lie all the time, that's fair. But also, they're definitely directing it towards kids. Introducing the Prageru Educators Program. And what is that?
Is a network that includes thousands of professors and teachers who show Prageru videos to their students and or use our curriculum as a teaching supplement in the classroom. Members of this community get free access to our video courses, study guides and other valuable resources that can enhance their teaching.
So, that's scary. There are teachers, like actual school teachers, showing these videos to their students. The ones that are just being wrong. So, I want to talk about some of the commenters that are in these Prageru spheres, circles, I don't know. Some of the people that just associate themselves with Prageru, and specifically some Twitter responses, because I figured that was where they'd be top of the line. But just for clarification, I did go on Instagram and I did go on YouTube, and they're about the same level. So I'm not cherry picking really, I'm just putting them out there. The tweet specifically that I'm looking at is, "It's time to call a spade a spade. Hashtag Black Lives Matter is a Marxist movement." So, you know, one of the top comments is, "Black Lives Matter is a freak show just like the other clowns at Antifa." They're trying to get at Antifa, but by saying Antifa, they're kind of just pointing back at PragerU. Thank you, a guy who I'm not going to say the name of. Someone here did a top text, bottom text Kermit drinking tea meme. Lovely. Someone tweeted out the bullshit "more whites are shot than blacks" chart, which, you know, I don't even remember if I've talked about this, but fuck it. Technically true, but that doesn't take into account that, like, the percentage of white people is way higher than the percentage of black people. So, like, naturally there's going to be more white people shot because we're just brutally outnumbering them. This one's a doozy. "These are all commies, motherfucking godless, those who believe, and a God-fearing should get together and fuck these commies and Marxists, the godless swines. It is time for the final countdown to make the power of the God eminent and manifest the God-fearing should take over the godless." I really felt that. That was a really good one. That changed my mind. This one just says, "Calm your titties, Dennis." Thank you. People, what's the difference between Black Lives Matter, Antifa, LGBT, and the inhuman Democratic Party? No. What they all have in common: allergic to common sense. They all hate our President Trump. Tearsforchildren.org. What's the difference between Antifa, the LGBTQ plus community, Black Lives Matter, and the whole Democratic Party? I feel like I don't need to explain what the difference between all of those are. Or at least at the very least I shouldn't. There's no such thing as a peaceful protest or protester. Everyone who's ever said Black Lives Matter is scum and should be thrown in jail for treason. Hashtag CAG. I don't know what that is either. It's something about Trump and being cool. Okay. Oh no. I'm sure hashtag CAG is glad that they have that guy on their side.
Don't wanna hear about it. Every single
Throughout the videos I've shown, they've contradicted themselves, blatantly given special treatment and lied, misrepresented science, art, and history, all wrapped up in a package of racists, conspiracy theorists, and just in general non-smart people. And they're trying their damnedest to get these lies shown to kids. And look, I'm not even really cherry picking here. In the description are countless PragerU takedowns. You know why? Because they're wrong all the fucking time. Don't show this to your students. I'm Bunku. All the sources are linked. I do a show called The Hogan Rogan Show. I have a second channel now where I do non-political things. And I'm gonna take a nap.